Okay, so we are 1 minute away. I see that Ashley, Pythian Priestess, has joined us there. I'm very excited for this. Ashley was on my list of like, oh my gosh, like wish list members. And I remember the day when I was talking with Gabby and she had quickly joined and then shared information about us on her Twitter. And it was one of those like, oh my gosh moments. I've been following her on Instagram for a while. She is a wealth of knowledge, a great speaker, and I am so excited to have her speak with you all today. Um, so yeah, Ashley, Pythian Priestess, if you can just share with us, for the people who may not know you, a little bit about yourself and what you'll be speaking about today, and then we can just dive in.
Yes, absolutely. Can everyone hear me okay, or do I need to add a special microphone?
I can hear you fine.
Excellent. So hello, everyone. My name is Pythian Priestess. My mundane name is Ashley, and it is such an honor to be speaking with all of you today. Thank you to Brandon and Hyro for giving this platform to speak. So I practice Hermeticism and infernal magic. Many of you probably know me from Witch Talk or the TikTok. This is Euphrates. This is my cat, also my familiar.
Oh.
He's always very nosy when it comes to anything Zoom related. But before we jump any further, I want to be very clear and explain that I identify as an occultist. And I want to give a little bit of clarity on what that means, because in the digital age, there seems to be a little bit of confusion about the difference between a witch and an occultist.
Mhm.
So I have worked really hard on creating my own definition of what an occultist is. An occultist is a noun. It is a soul whose skills are a combination of being a scholar, a detective, a mystic, and a scientist in order to reach your highest spiritual potential. Now, this could also be applied to witches as well, but for me, I feel witches have a lot of heavy connotations regarding to historical events, but it is totally up to you on however you identify. But more importantly today, I'm going to be talking about magic and truth. I have a background in philosophy and theology. I earned my bachelor's degree at Flagler College in 2014, where I spent a lot of my time studying ancient philosophy, as well as nihilism and existentialism. Those were my two main focuses during my course of study. And what I found really interesting was recently, when I really fell into Hermeticism very heavily about 2 years ago, I came up with this definition of magic and how it relates to us in the world. And I'll share this definition with you now. Magic is the art of manipulating the unseen forces of nature and having control over the four elemental bodies and consciously molding energy to create change. Magic has been an important part of humanity since the dawn of time, and it is intimately connected to everything in our world, from the esoteric to science, fashion, art, psychology, and more. Magic is the underlying current of our life. And all of us are born with the ability to wield magic, but few will dedicate themselves to this craft. As we all know from Spiderman, the great axiom, with great power comes great responsibility. This famous phrase is especially true in the digital era. As magic and occultism become more popular in the mainstream, there are many falsehoods that appear in the digital space. And these falsehoods can appear in many different ways. They appear as misinformation, slang words, and sometimes a little bit more nefarious, like the rise of destructive digital cults. And this brings me to our topic today, one of the oldest philosophical debates, truth. What is it? How do we know what is true in a messy sea of digital information? And why is truth so crucial in the digital age of social media? So in the first part of this keynote speech, I will be discussing what is truth. Now understand, this is such a large philosophical subject that it took me a while to really narrow down and find exactly what I wanted to say about it. And let's start with that truth is one of the central and most significant parts of philosophy. It has been a topic of discussion in its right for thousands of years. But why? Because truth is challenging. It is difficult to pinpoint exactly what this abstract idea is and why there are so many variations on what truth is and or could be. So we're going to fly all the way back to ancient Greece. But before we talk about Plato, we're going to talk about some philosophers like Xenophon and Democritus, who suggested that truth was neither accessible to mortals or that mortals had a greatly limited understanding of it. Similarly, I have found that Plato has a similar ideology, that truth is actually very limited to us mortals. And he hid this in some of his writing, but only an initiate would be able to understand the symbols that Plato used in his writing to come up with this ideology. So some quick notes on Plato just to refresh your memory. Plato was a very popular Athenian philosopher during the classical period of ancient Greece. He also ran the first philosophical school, known as the Lyceum, later known in the Enlightenment era as the Academy. Plato was a student of Socrates and is considered to be one of the cornerstones of Western philosophy. I recently found an essay written by Manly P. Hall called Plato the Initiate, and this immediately grabbed my attention. Hall goes on to note that Plato was an initiate of the Eleusinian Mysteries, the state mysteries, which were a cult of Demeter and Persephone, based in the Panhellenic sanctuary of the Eleusis in ancient Greece. These were the foundations of the state and the understanding that they were the protectors of communal security. Now, Plato originally had not intended to stay in Greece. He really wanted to follow in the footsteps of Pythagoras by journeying to Asia to study with the Brahmins. But such a trip was impractical due to the warfare. So Plato turned to the Egyptians. According to ancient accounts and a record now housed in the British Museum, Plato was initiated at Sais by the Egyptian rites of Isis and Osiris. He was 47 years old when he was initiated. Now that we're armed with this esoteric knowledge of Plato, let's look at arguably the most famous allegory in the Western philosophy, the allegory of the cave. So I'm going to be starting at book 7 of the Republic. This is where the allegory of the cave begins. This myth describes the true nature of the soul. And remember that Plato is using Socrates as a character in the Republic. This may not be exactly what Socrates said. So let us begin. Socrates describes a group of human souls who have lived deep in a cave since birth. They have never seen the light of day. These souls are prisoners. They are bound and shackled to the wall, so they can only stare straight ahead at the cave wall. Behind these prisoners is a large fire, and between them and the fire is a partial wall. So just to make sure that we spatially understand what's happening, we have a wall here dividing between the fire and these people here who are chained looking straight forward. On top of this wall right here, there are various kinds of statues. They are being manipulated by a group of people called puppeteers. This group of people lie out of sight. They are not acknowledged by the prisoners at all. These puppeteers are politicians, religious figures, and artists who move these statues that cast shadows across the wall that the prisoners are facing. The prisoners watch these shadows every day and take in the stories that these shadows tell and believe them to be reality. However, the story goes that at one point, a prisoner is freed from his bonds. And when he looks at the fire behind him, he experiences great pain and confusion from exposure to the light. However, after seeing the statues, he understands that what he's seeing now, these statues, are actually more accurate than the shadows he had always taken to be reality. The message that's conveyed in these early paragraphs of the allegory of the cave is that a soul should attempt to break free in order to discover for themselves what reality is, and eventually to truth. These are the beginning steps to becoming a philosopher, or perhaps more accurately, a mystic. The following message is that understanding the reality in the cave, these shadows are not satisfying enough. That the soul should be working towards understanding truth with a capital T in its purest and highest form in the intelligible realm. As the allegory continues. I'm sorry? Okay. The prisoner crawls out of the cave into the world above. The prisoner is in such pain from looking at the light that he can actually only look down at shadows around him. Eventually, his eyes are able to adjust, and then he can look at the reflections of the true things, the true here with a capital T. First, he looks into the reflection of the water and actually sees himself for the first time. And then he is finally able to look at the actual objects and understand what a tree is, not just the shadow of a tree that he has experienced down below in the cave. He is now able to understand that these things, known as the forms with a capital F, are more real than the copies that he has seen before. The prisoner has caught his first glimpse of the real things. Again, these are known as forms. When the prisoner's eyes have fully adjusted to the brightness, he looks up at the sun, and the sun represents the form of the good. And now the former prisoner, who has now become a philosopher or a mystic, has reached the stage of understanding and enlightenment. For Plato, the forms are the eternal, immutable blueprints or models for everything that is on the physical plane. And this means for Plato that truth with a capital T is objective. Our knowledge of the true propositions must be about real things. According to Plato, these real things are the forms, and their nature is such that only we can understand them through rationality. Moreover, Plato holds that our souls learned about the forms before we were even born. We were born with innate knowledge about them that must be elicited through what Plato claims is the Socratic method, or pure reason. Through this allegory, we understand that the physical world is a shadow or reflection of the divine world. All these forms are suspended from the principles here on our physical plane. All extensions of energy bore witness to the sovereign unity and the splendid source of life of all living things. Now remember that Plato is describing the forms with a capital F, making it formal. As we would then capitalize the word God, again, making it formal. This is where we're going to deviate into my ideology, where I think we can make a very distinct differentiation between two different kinds of truth. Let me explain a little bit more clearly. First, we have true with a capital T. This is an objective truth, as Plato shows us in the allegory of the cave, and an absolute or cosmic truth outside of our experience on the physical plane. And the only way we can truly understand these forms and the greater truth is through pure reason or knowledge. The German philosopher Soren Kierkegaard agrees that objective truths are very important for studying subjects like mathematics, science, and history. They are relevant and necessary, but he also argues that these objective truths do not shed any light on a person's inner relationship to existence. And that's where subjective truth comes in. Subjective truth is truth with a small t, lowercase t. And this means that truth has been manufactured to suit human belief and gains widespread acceptance as truth. This ideology of the lowercase t is called social constructivism. Social constructivism holds that truth is constructed by a social process that is historically and culturally specific and shaped through the power struggles within a community. Through this constructionist view, we understand that all of our knowledge is constructed because it does not reflect any external transcendent realities like the forms. But instead, the perceptions of truth are viewed as contingent on convention, human perception, and our social experience. There is a very famous quote in Latin, "Vernum ipsum factum," truth itself is constructed, later adopted by philosophers like Hegel and Marx, accepting the existence of an objective truth, but rather distinguished between true knowledge and, remember that's knowledge with a capital T, and then personal knowledge or subjective knowledge that has been distorted through power or ideology. Subjective truth is given to us through our individual experiences around us. In short, these are the truths that we have been raised to believe in. These are the truths that we empirically come to on our own through our senses. If you're part of my Patreon class, you will know that I often talk about the human experience as a prism. For those of you who are not familiar, I will do a quick breakdown for you. Let's all take a moment to recall the Pink Floyd album, The Dark Side of the Moon. If you're not familiar with this album, go ahead and Google it. You will see that in this picture, there is a white line of light that is entering a prism and then being refracted as a rainbow. This is an excellent example of how objective truth, the white light, is being taken in by the human mind or perception, the prism, and being refracted as different colors by our construction of a viewpoint, creating a rainbow of understanding. These are small, lowercase, subjective truths. Each of these colors are unique and beautiful and deserve celebration. And ultimately, we should remember that this rainbow becomes part of that white light, and each color is part of the whole. We are that sovereign unity. It's important to understand that subjective truth is not always in opposition of the objective truth, but rather it depends on the human learning to value compassion and perception over their narrative worldview. Now, don't get me wrong. There are naive, ignorant, and downright malicious truths with a small t that are fabricated to be self-serving for people with horrible aspirations, such as war, propaganda, genocide, and all forms of manufactured falsehoods. And it could be said that subjective truth, in fact, isn't a truth at all, but rather a belief. But because our society values strength to the individual and personal experience rather than the experience of the whole, we must bow to the power of these individual truths as individual beliefs as a truth. We see this very strongly in internet culture. Under many quick and ambiguous, thoughtful quotes like, "You do you, boo-boo," or "Speak your truth," when in fact we are speaking our experience and belief. At best, these truths can provide a narrow perspective that has little to do with one's life experience, and at worst, they can become destructive towards the education of burgeoning mystics. But it's important to understand that truth with a lowercase t serves a very important purpose and should not be brushed aside as useless. One's existence and subjective experience are always working in the favor of the soul's process of becoming and evolution. The highest values and morals and spiritual approaches of a person can only become truly known when they have inwardly reflective on their subjective truths. But while not denying the existence of objective truths, and this is where things start to become destructive. This is really, in the case of occult social media, the rise of unverified personal gnosis, or what I'm calling subjective truths. In many cases, these lowercase t subjective truths will deny the existence of objective truths, or even worse, not acknowledge them at all. So how do we share and make distinctions between what truth is as we are sharing as content creators and occultists? To tie this back to Plato's allegory of the cave, as content creators, we are the puppeteers. We are tending to the fire, moving the statues around. This is a very important and vital role of our society. But it's also very tricky because most people are unwilling or unable to break free and search for the exit to the cave on their own because they have become so comfortable with their version of reality through the shadows on the wall. The most important thing to understand is that you cannot bring experience to those people. You cannot force them to leave the cave. You cannot bring awakening to them. At the end of Plato's allegory, the human who left the cave and experienced the light was changed, even enlightened. They excitedly run back to the others. But those fellow humans who were still prisoners cannot comprehend or understand what this person is saying, for they have only known shadows. And in fact, the prisoners become so enraged with the escapee that they kill him. They would rather protect their understanding of reality than branch out and evolve. Sharing occult information is a very sensitive business. You are handling sacred information, the knowledge that has somehow, against all odds, to what is has come ostensibly to what is the future now. Some wonderful institutions, such as the Philosophical Research Society in Los Angeles and the Center for History of Hermetic Philosophy at the University of Amsterdam, work very hard to fund academic studies and classes on Western esotericism. Now, while none of us can bring truth with a capital T or an awakening to our audiences because we are limited by our human experience, we can express small parts of these objective truths through sacred geometry, philosophy, esoterica, and of course, ritual. But mostly, we will be sharing our subjective truths. Now, this idea of sharing your truth seems fairly harmless at first. It's promoting authenticity, right? Yes and no. It becomes very dangerous when we mix this idea with the esoteric or the occult. This theory quickly becomes problematic because sharing your truth can quickly fall into a slippery slope of hubris. Some content creators take up mantles like, I'm the daughter of Athena, or I'm the chosen one of Aphrodite. And this may absolutely be true in the sense that it is that perception of that practitioner. But that kind of UPG or unverified personal gnosis can lead to an inflated ego, and if unchecked, can be taken as an objective truth. Now, this creates some genuine and difficult confusion among those beginning to emerge into the esoteric realm, creating genuine gaps in occult information and, at its worst, the rise of destructive cults. These curious children, teenagers, and young adults are being lured into traps by narcissists who trip over having the spiritual power over those who are still crawling their way out of the cave. These narcissistic cult leaders are not concerned with objective truth, but rather they are focused with what is inside their sphere of sensation and what is in their control. Now, undeniably, sharing our UPG is almost unavoidable because, as we learn through Plato, it is impossible to share the forms as objective truths. We cannot bring that experience to others. But we can try by sharing ideologies from alchemists and occultists of the past, but it will never, ever replace the experience or moment of awakening for the audience. It seems here that we have reached an impasse. Why bother even making occult content if I cannot bring truth to my audience? As occultists, we understand that great power is wielded through these ancient texts, symbols, and rituals. It is not our responsibility to bring the awakening to the people in the cave. They must do that themselves. But what we can do is become the puppeteers, tend to the fire and the statues, as Plato would say. We can share the information about these occult symbols and knowledge that connect to the objective truth or the forms. For example, let's share the meaning of the pentagram. We know that different meanings exist depending on what magical system, culture, and time period we are looking at. All of these different meanings are a subjective truth grappling to understand and explain an objective truth. I think it would be unfair to completely disregard UPG and a subjective truth, because this is how an occultist develops their sense of self, expands their knowledge and curiosity. All of these things are beautiful. They are also fluid and dynamic, meaning that subjective truths should be built as malleable, not static or firm. For it is healthy to have your worldview shattered a few times throughout your life. This shows growth and evolution. But when it comes to sharing unverified personal gnosis on social media, I think it is okay to share with some caveats, very specific ones. Specifically, using the hashtag UPG or write it somewhere in your video. By being transparent with your audience, what is historical information and what is your subjective truth, we should be open to somebody sharing conflicting information with our UPG and be open to even it being disproved at some point. I think there is also another option to consider that may not be as popular as it used to be maybe 20 years ago. The old axiom, to will, to know, to dare, to keep silent. To know refers to the idea that the spiritual journey is one of knowledge and that knowledge is never ending. If we indeed know, then we must consistently be learning, questioning, and expanding our horizons. We also must know ourselves before we can know our true path. As many of you hear me say, you must know thyself. To dare. To dare can be interpreted as having courage, curiosity that we need to grow by daring ourselves to step out of our comfort zone, to become something that people see as other. By being daring, we are facing that which is unknown. To will. Understand that will is spelled with a capital W here. And this means to have determination and perseverance. Nothing of value comes with ease, and our spiritual growth is no exception. Our will guides us and leads us to success, and without it, we are stagnant. And lastly, to keep silent. Now, this seems like it should be an obvious one, but it's a little bit more complex than it appears on the surface. To keep silent has many meanings. One, knowing when to keep our practices private. What information is not meant for public consumption? And I know it can be so exciting and we want to share with everyone immediately. But I caution young occultists from using social media as a diary or even a grimoire. If you are going to share a piece of unverified personal gnosis, I would ask yourself first, what value is shared from making this UPG public? In an age where knowledge is abundant, but truth is muddled, it is essential for all of us as occultists, witches, magicians, practitioners, however you identify, to step up and be more transparent with what kind of information we are sharing and what content we are creating. I believe that we have the responsibility to share these occult symbols as well as information with historical accuracy as well as verified sources. This self-categorization is not meant to gatekeep, but rather help to distinguish when UPG is being stated and what is more academic or historical. This self-verification is essential. It will give the occult more weight in the academic world, making it more palpable for curious people, but who may be a little bit timid. The massive social media boom has many pros and cons when it comes to the occult. The best is showing younger generations an openness of the mystical and spiritual side of life. But at its worst, older men and women creating a cult of children and teenagers, controlling them and extorting them by fear, and stepping up as an example, as an occultist, by differentiating your different types of truths and being transparent about where your information comes from will help every occult community. Thank you.
Thank you. That was amazing. A lot of it reflected things that we talk about in our office hours events. we've brought up the concept of the prism a lot, about how our perception colors our magic and our experience. And even our, just like you were saying with UPG, even our relationships with our deity are through the prism. These larger archetypes and energies come through us and through our pre-standing notions and ideas and experiences, and they fan out into different colors, each one unique to each different person. So I just wanted to point out that that's something that we talk about a lot. I wanted to open this up for questions and comments from the audience. We could have some back and forth here.
And that would be lovely.
Yes, so just please raise your hand if you have a comment or a question, and we'll keep the conversation going. I see, I'm not sure. Hold on, let me change my view. I'm
I'm
not
so
sure.
glad that you guys liked that. That took me 2 weeks to write, so I
No,
really
that was
appreciate it.
fantastic. It's based in a lot of the conversations that we have here. We are about, like I said, we are not about denying other people's practices or their UPGs, but we are about maintaining somewhat of a standard when it comes to a deeper understanding of why our UPGs might differ from more traditional standpoints on what people may or may not be experiencing. Wade or Chris, I'm not sure which person raised their hand first.
I'll let Chris go first.
Okay, cool. Chris.
Hi, hello. So this is really interesting because I noticed that you separate truth with capital T and little t and belief, and that was something I was doing in my own spiritual notes. So this really surprised me, and I was happy because, like you say, it's the thing you noticed that start to make you see past the shadow in the allegory.
Mm-hmm.
And wait, what I was going to say? Yeah, I have a sentence that was often coming to me, and I wonder if it speaks to you. It's there is a difference between what you feel, perceive, and how you interpret it.
Yeah.
Well, absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
I think that, so we're gonna use some philosophical words here. So so there's 2 types of knowledge according to Immanuel Kant. There's a priori knowledge, meaning it comes from reason. And then there's a posteriori, which means it comes through the body. Now, these 2 words are very similar. I'm going to tell you the secret that my philosophy teacher taught me. It's a little gross, but it works. So post is when it goes through your body as if you were digesting something. It comes in your mouth and goes through your stomach and out you. So when we are experiencing a posteriori knowledge, this is empirical evidence, meaning it works with our senses and our perception of the world, whereas a priori knowledge is more based in our mind through pure reason, which Immanuel Kant will tell you is like 100, but we disagree on that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Wade.
Okay, first off, I just want to say I saw you stressing last night about this. You killed it. Great, excellent stuff. I want to. So I'm the resident old guy around here.
Hello, resident old guy.
Yeah. Not a guy, but I use it because it's funny. I came up through a Golden Dawn tradition.
Mm.
I'm old school, and that your statement about cults and that sort of behavior, that's been going on in occult circles forever.
Yeah. You're right.
Like there's so much of that, like grooming and abuse and building your own little thing. And like I just recently took an apprentice, and I've never taken an apprentice before. And so I had to be real honest with myself about, okay, what are the guidelines? What are the rules? You know, like, how do I approach this and make sure that the person that is trusting me is taken care of? And so one of the things that I approach this with, I like to follow the thing I eventually landed on was campsite rules. You come across the campsite, it's got wood, it's well manicured, and you spend the night. And then you leave the campsite in a better state than you found it.
Yeah.
It's I'm really glad you brought that particular thing up, because I see a big prevalence of it in occult circles. So
it's become a really big issue. I'm not sure how many of you are on TikTok. I mean, I'm sorry if you're on TikTok, but also there have been a number of cults that have arisen. I'm not sure who's familiar with the Athena Grace cult, where this woman claimed that she was Medusa.
What?
And yeah, it was wild. Turned
Yeah,
out
I recall that one.
there was some like child pedophilia going on. It was bad. So it really means a lot to me as someone who was in a cult at a young age, to really, for all of us to take that responsibility and step up and say, like, this is not okay. Like, by being an example. Fighting with people doesn't do anything. It just gives them more power. So I encourage all of you to really lead by example rather than fight fire with fire.
Yeah, there's something that we talk about sometimes here as well, is say what you need to say, but remember that being right never changed anybody's mind or behavior. That came up in your speech. Like, people have to lead themselves there. All you can do is throw up a shadow on the wall that says, maybe you're going the right way, go this other way. So yeah, that's so important. We have some comments here in the chat.
There's some crazy people on that app. Yes, there are.
Oh, we got some love for you. You're one of the few content creators that Viv follows. Yeah, I would love to get other questions or comments for.
And I'm happy to clarify or repeat myself. Like, do not worry if there's something in that speech that you need me to go over.
Stixie? Cannot hear you. You're not on mute, but I can't hear you. It's very soft. Speak again.
Hello.
Hello.
All right. Third time's the charm. Okay. I was wondering if you had some different resources or places where I could read up on like capital truth versus lowercase truth. Because like I kind of like I get the concept, but I haven't heard it described that way. And I want to read more.
So I'm going to show you the book that I got this from. It's not, it's kind of, hold on. So this is my college book of Plato. This is the collected works of Plato.
Okay.
It's edited by Edith Hamilton. So the idea of capital truth and lowercase truth is what I kind of took from my philosophy professor when we were studying the Phaedro. That's Phaedro. That is the dialogue that I would recommend looking at if you were interested in learning more about truth.
Okay.
From Plato, and of course the Republic, as Wade suggests. Now, for those of you who do not have a philosophical background, these works can be so overwhelming because, like, I, someone trained in this, have to read every paragraph like 2 or 3 times to fully grasp everything. Do not be afraid to go look at Spark Notes or Cliff Notes to understand the fuck is happening in that sentence. It is totally okay.
All right. Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Aura?
So just to sort of summarize, the point is that we've got a problem in the occult community with people misrepresenting their personal lowercase truths as capital T truths, or just lots of people who don't know the difference. And then when people misrepresent themselves, they just kind of take this as, oh, this is capital T true, without realizing that there's a distinction there.
Yes, I think that is true. I think that there's I think there's a big problem when a lot of young people who have not yet developed the critical thinking skills necessary. Remember, being an occultist requires a couple of different things. You need to be a detective, you need to be a scholar, you need to, in order to, like, there's a couple other things that I'd have to look up my exact quote. But what's important here is that we lead by example. And if anyone is like posting UPG, just hashtag UPG. It's not that hard. And this just is a small indication of saying, hey, what I'm saying comes from my a posteriori knowledge. And this is not verified by any ancient, like, historical, blah, blah, blah. This is my ideology. Now, what you may learn is that some of your UPG totally lines up with some ancient knowledge. For example, my first experience with the goddess Isis, I experienced her with like giant wings, and she like wrapped them around me. And later when I was doing work, I'm like, oh yes, she's known as the goddess of wings or feathers. I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. So now I understand that my UPG has some verification through other texts and sources.
Yeah, and I think I've had this kind of experiences too, and it's really cool when your UPG does line up with SPG or shared personal gnosis. Even me, like I've been in the occult for a few years now, and I think I'm pretty good at representing my own theories as being, just that, my own theories, and I'll couch it in a lot of language, like it seems to me, or in my personal experience. But I think like it's easy to slip up with this, and if you're having like more of a casual conversation, but it's in public, it's really easy to get misunderstood or misinterpreted when you're just sort of like bantering around ideas in that sort of like lighthearted way. I think with people who like I guess there's sort of an assumption embedded in there. I sort of assume that most of the people around me have, similar levels of experience and are able to use their discernment to figure out what's, shared personal gnosis versus unverified personal gnosis versus, historically verified material or like the original literature. But I think it's really easy to forget that people who are new to this don't make those distinctions as easily as people who have been at it for a year or two.
Yeah, they definitely don't, because they're new, and that's okay to be new. It's okay to make mistakes, but how do we learn from those mistakes is we have people who show us the right way to be in this community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really what the kind of space we're trying to cultivate here.
Yes, and that's why I love Hyro. Like, I know, like I try to stay off TikTok pretty much these days. So I'm very happy that there's a burgeoning occult community of intellectual and like-minded people.
Yes, I thought it was so important to the first part of the day was me and Gabby, our community curator, talking about hierarchical values and the past, present, and future and all that. And we just kept emphasizing how important it is for us to fight for the culture that we're creating here, because it is not supported by like the outside, the grander culture that we're in right now. And it's really important that we encourage new seekers to also come into the community and find that proper guidance.
Absolutely.
Very important. Ursa.
Hi, thank you so much for your lecture. It was so great to listen to. Kind of piggybacking a little bit of what Ara was touching on when it comes to new people in the community. I think it's really easy to fall into the glamour when we follow these charismatic people and what they're saying, and it's very easy to start trusting them and taking them as authority. So do you have any tips of how to train yourself to be that better detective? How do you get to that level of discernment? Are there any exercises or recommendations or anything like that you can share?
Yes, absolutely. So, one of the most important things is creating space in our lives. And now, the easiest way to do that is learning not to be reactive. So, let's say we have an experience, and here's a great example. So, a couple of months ago, I had put some mistletoe on my Isis altar for Christmas, which ended badly. More or less, it got yeeted off of the altar and like it tore her picture down. And I was like, okay, like something is seriously wrong here. And I, instead of like freaking out and being like, oh my God, she's so mad at me. Oh my God, the world is ending. I was like, hey, let's step back. Let's do some deep breathing. Try to take 3 deep breaths at least. Remember that your breath is the only automatic function in your body that you can control. You can't control your digestion. You can't control your heart rate, but you can control how much you breathe. Learning not to be reactive is so important in this community because, as stated down in the chat, there are a lot of young people in this community who want to fight for their ideas and they want to like immediately grab on to the first emotional thing that comes to them. You cannot really do magic very well if you're in an emotional state. Why? Because emotions are the language of the body. When we are working with magic, we are working with higher vibrational frequencies. Learning to meditate, learning to create that space, learning to not immediately push send is so important. Just taking that step back and say, for example, let's continue with mine. When that mistletoe was thrown off the altar, I was like, oh, first I was like, oh, fuck, what did I do wrong? And then I went into meditation and then I did some research. I'm like, all right, what is mistletoe? And I learned, oh, it's a parasitic plant. I'm not supposed to put a parasitic plant on an altar of light. It would choke. Yeah. You know. So a lot of people are going to see my TikTok, which is, guys, I'm going to tell you this right now. It's acting. Like there's a video of me going, oh my God, something crazy happened. Why? Because it's acting. That's what I think a lot of people misunderstand, that if you want like the genuine teachings of that, you have to get off of this 1-minute app. You've got to get away from this reactivity. Instead, write things down, create a journal, create your grimoire, and be consistent with it. When you are able to write down your UPGs and then you write down like information that you've looked up, you can go back later and be a better detective and be like, on March 18th, I had this UPG that has now been verified on July 23rd by this research that I found. So it's about creating records for yourself. It's about not creating space and understanding that your practice doesn't need to be socially like publicized.
Yeah.
Like, and I know, Brandon, we've talked about this, like, this is the biggest thing for people right now is that, like, are you really a witch if you don't show your practice? Well, hell yeah, you are.
Yeah.
In fact, I would say you're probably a better witch, but that's just my opinion. Did I answer your question?
Yes, that was great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, this
Stixie has their hand up.
Yeah, I have. This is just kind of, it's not so much a question as just something to add, but you talked about how that video that you posted was acting. And I think that's really important. And I didn't think about until recently is that interactions with entities and deities that are on the internet are almost always dramatizations. You know, it's not just, this is what happened. It's, look at the thing, you know? And so I think I'm slightly embarrassed that I didn't think about this until recently, but I've gotten better at looking through the dramatizations to see what's actually happened, and then like comparing that to my experiences rather than comparing the dramatizations to my experiences. And something else I saw, there was a content creator, I don't remember who it was, but they were speaking about mediumship and and recognizing that things are dramatized on the internet. Like they are. That's how it is. And also, sorry, I'm not the most articulate today. Speaking dramatizations on the internet and ruling out mundane answers before magical answers. So you need to, if you do want to work on communicating with deities or spirits, you need to talk to like a therapist, a mental health professional, and let them know like, hey, I'm doing this thing. I want to make sure I'm doing it safely and the correct way. And that if you get concerns about mental health conditions, you know, we do something about it. And yeah. Okay. That's all I'm going to say.
That's very wise. You know, there's a reason why there's a mythology of people going insane from studying the occult. One other thing that I'd like to touch on there is if you go through my videos, anytime I do a dramatization, I always put for entertainment purposes only. I promise you that Lady Lilith does not come in front of my bed and throw Tylenol at my face.
And I think that's really important. Like when I'm not on TikTok a lot at all. I mostly do things from the aggregators on Instagram, but like when I'm looking at that stuff, especially with deities, I'm not so much, I'm obviously when I'm laughing and stuff, I'm listening to what they're saying or what's happening. And it's not, for me, that's not the information that I'm pulling from it. For me, it's more energetic. Does this fit in with even the archetype of the deity? Because it can be very fun, right? And like Lilith throwing the Tylenol at you is like very appropriate, not literal. But if someone were to have something wildly outside of the archetype that you're known, you can be sure that it's pretty personal and entertainment in its weight.
And
oh, sorry.
Sorry. I don't post about deity work because I'm not comfy with that at this moment. But when I was talking to my friend about it, I said something about how like Apollo like bullied me into taking care of myself. And obviously that didn't really happen. What I meant is that during a tarot reading, he was like, hey, take care of yourself. You know, that's
what it is, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's fun to be dramatic about it, right? Like it makes it feel like more alive, like these interactions, because like these interactions are extremely subtle and they're also in our mind. So it's very fun to amp them up and act like they were these things that happened like with us standing with someone else, or et cetera, et cetera. Wade.
So this is fun. I, based on the previous conversation, I saw a lot of abuse in occult circles when I was coming up after I was initiated as a priest, the whole fucking thing. Pardon my French. And I spent time in what I like to refer to as the atheist salt mines. I have a Christopher Hitchens tattoo on my arm. Like, respect. Because he's one of the best skeptics of the modern era. But that does not diminish what it is that we do. It just allows me that opportunity to look at something with an objective lens and go, okay, is this real or am I just fucking up here? And so I would urge everybody to study some rhetoricians, as Pythian Priest just said, study your philosophy, get that stuff into your brain, because when you do that, it's going to have, it's going to give you a better objective lens.
Like with anything, you want a strong foundation. And you want your foundation rooted. I think there's some feedback. You want your foundation to be rooted in as close to the capital T as possible. And And yeah, having a skeptic's eye, I like to assume, even if something wild is happening, I like to do a quick check. Like I assume at first it's something else. If it persists beyond my check, then there's probably something more going on. Katerina?
I wanted to like add a little something about the dramatization on TikTok. I think it's really cool when we people like content creators dramatize and like make it seem like the goddesses or like something just came up to them and told them, yeah, bitch, do this and that. The thing is like it when I first started it, when people are naive, for example, me in witchcraft, when it comes to witchcraft, I'm such a beginner. I'm still kind of naive to things. Like I knew that things didn't happen like that, but in the beginning, I was always like, oh, I don't have a deity. I don't feel connected to a deity. Like, am I not enough to be in witchcraft? Until I talked to some more witches and they told me like, no, you don't need that. You can have other things to work with, or you just cannot have any. But I remember like I imagine the amount of people that probably feel like the more naive ones might feel like, oh, I'm not enough for this. Like I don't have this. This doesn't happen to me. I don't see this because I am dense. Excuse my French. I am dense as fuck. Like everything comes to me and I just do not see it. So I'm like, is the world telling me things and it just goes over my head? Like what's happening?
No, and that's the other side of it, right? Like this entertainment can also leave new practitioners feeling like their experiences are somehow invalid or less meaningful because they don't resemble the dramatized anecdotes that's on TikTok.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well,
So
I appreciate your viewpoint, right? Like I saw someone write in the chat here that everyone on TikTok believes that you need a deity. You don't need a deity.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought before because I've known about witchcraft for a long time. I like since I was 15, I'm 21. I've knew about this for a long time, but I just never really entered because I was like, oh, I'm not deserving of it.
yeah. And that's important, right? Like it's our own journey. You're valid, like your own journey is valid no matter what is happening in the lives of the people around you. All right,
Yeah.
so I want to give everybody a chance to run to the bathroom, and I want to give Ashley the rest of her day back to her. But thank you so much. This was amazing. You are quite the public speaker. I think we all really enjoyed this, and it had us walk away feeling more sure about how we conduct ourselves on Hyro and all of that. Yeah, so thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Brendan, and for everyone who took the time to listen to me today. I am on Hyro, so you're more than welcome to follow me, message me, whatever you would like. You are all so wonderful, and I hope to see you in the future.
Yes, thank you. Bye.